I am Marwan Cameron, and this is The Conduit. All right, everyone, it is 12:03 in Kitsap County. It is Wednesday, January 19th. Welcome to all of you. Appreciate you joining us today for our show, Tipping Points and Puzzle Pieces, with Mark Boatwright-Frost. How are you doing today, Mark?
I am doing excellent. How about you, Marwan?
Oh man, I'm blessed and highly favored. Excited to spend the next hour with you today. How was your weekend?
Weekend was very busy and working on a little project around our end of year report. I think you actually have a draft of that.
Yep, I do have a draft of that. It's a really good report that'll be made available on the website later on this week. So check it out. I will make an announcement when that is up. So please do go and check out www.reseco.org for that. But like I said, I'll send out an announcement once it goes live. Shout out to Roseco's own Terry. Shout out to you, Terry. Good afternoon. So we're gonna go ahead and get into our show today. Mark, you didn't ask me how my weekend was. I feel
How was your weekend?
you
I
know,
assume blessed.
it was blessed. I am trying to do my best at making myself better and teach other people. So, last week I was teaching myself about static IP addresses. This week I'm gonna repaint the kitchen and the bathroom because I do Cameron's kitchen, and so we're gonna get in and do some cooking and maybe have some guest cooks come in and show me how to make healthier meals and things like that. So I wanted to present well, so trying to get some things done behind the scenes.
Scrambled eggs with green onions.
Ooh, that sounds pretty good. I love onions. I haven't tried it with green onions.
Yeah, green onions and scrambled eggs. And just cook it in a little bit of butter. And I learned this from a special, an Anthony Bourdain special. He did like these little 2-minute cooking tips. And you'd basically do a figure eight with a fork in the pan, and the eggs come out perfectly every time.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I know there's a lot of medicinal properties in food, turmeric and things like that, if you know how to use them and educate yourself. So I want to do some more of that this year and then educate others. I think that coincides very well with Terry says that's what she's making right now. Shout out to Terry. But things that can help with inflammation and anxiety and things like that. So I want to learn about that and then kind of share that out. And if those are things that I can grow, like in my windowsill or something like that, then start taking advantage of those things. So
I'll certainly be glad to share that. I've been cooking since I was 5 years old. I've been a professional chef twice in my life, and I've done catering as recently as a couple 3 years ago because I like doing it.
I love it. All right. Well, then stay tuned, everyone. We will Cameron's Kitchen. We'll get off and running here in a little while, and then we'll have guest cooks come in and teach me their favorite recipes and teach me a little bit about food and how foods and seasonings go together and things like that. I do not cook. I am a professional eater, but I will be your sous chef. I will wash all the dishes. So I will wash anything.
Yeah, I'm starting to think about a halibut with ginger marmalade
Wow. Okay.
over a bed of saffron rice.
Wow. Yeah. That sounds really good. You want that to be your first meal?
That would be great. I can do that and teach you how to make it.
Oh, I love
Really
it.
simple and it's something you can eat.
Well, let's do it. Let's do it for the halibut.
Okay. Ow.
Hey, dad jokes. I'll be here all day.
Try the veal.
Try the veal. Hey, I mentioned that to someone the other day, and they got really mad at me. So that's baby cow. Do you know what they do to those cows? So, yeah, I definitely offended her sensibilities there.
Considering that the work I do is about, keeping my cool in most situations and helping people work through their issues. There are moments when people say stuff like that to me, and I look at them and go, "You really need to get a life."
Well, I tease. I know people can be emotional on that. It's like, well, I mean, just the babies. Well, I shouldn't say it on there. I don't want to offend a whole bunch of other people, but
You know,
uh,
it's interesting though that you say that, because it's something I addressed in the report, and I talk about all the time. Is that we cannot really change other people's behavior and way of looking at things by being outraged or upset that they do things differently than we do them. And when you think about it, and this is going to light up some fires, the whole abortion issues around this.
oh
You
man.
know, it really isn't anybody's business but the person and the doctor. It really isn't. If this is a personal health decision, why is the government involved at all? And to find the people that are battling that and want the government involved, these are the same people that don't want the government involved in their life with taxes and finances. I mean, you can have one side or the other, but you can't have it both ways. If you want the government out, they have to be out altogether. So, we have a level of hypocrisy and a level of needing to control somebody else's life. And I always ask why. Why do you need to control somebody else's behavior? Why do you not want Marwan to eat veal? It's about him, isn't it? It's about his choices.
And it's so delicious.
And it's so delicious. Veal with a red wine sauce. Oh,
Really?
red wine and garlic. Yeah. And just like cook it and serve it up with some, oh, I'd go with garlic mashed potatoes with that one, and maybe some fried Brussels sprouts.
I'm so glad she's not watching right now. Well, let's jump into our show.
All
As
right.
you know, everyone, the show is called Tipping Points and Puzzle Pieces. And what we said was we were going to have a question of the week. So I'm going to go ahead and put our question of the week in the chat here. And the question of the week is, why is this necessary? Why is this necessary? So as you're thinking about why is it necessary to you, Mark is going to talk about why he believes it's necessary.
And before the show, Marwan and I were joking around a little bit because we use a lot of game metaphor in talking about the Kitsap Resiliency Project and developing resilient communities. And for the next section, answering the why is it necessary, I'm going to talk about dominoes. And then I will talk about jigsaw puzzles because they are the things that we use as metaphor for the problem and metaphor for the solution. So the problems why is this necessary? I know that most people don't have EPA data at their fingertips. They haven't sat in meetings with scientists. They haven't interviewed water professionals across the country. They haven't talked with people about renewable energy. They haven't looked at the agriculture issues. They don't talk to soil scientists about the erosion of soils and how much soil we have left. Most people don't think about these things because they can't. They can't. They go to work. They go home. They eat dinner. They go to bed. They try not to let the fear freeze them. But it's our job, mine, yours, and the people involved in this, to look at that and look at it head on. And when you do, you realize that there are a lot of dominoes stacked up and ready to fall. And when you do, you start realizing how they cascade. So let's use water for a moment because it's the example I use in the report. And I think it's apropos because it's only one example, but it shows you how it cascades. People can live for 3 days without water. They can live for almost 21 days without food. But without water, you don't have food.
Mm,
So you see how that cascades there?
right.
If you don't have water, you can't grow food. If you don't have water, you cannot process wastewater. So you have a toxic situation there. Water is the key element of a lot of the things we require to live. So when you look at that and use the water as the first domino, what exactly is our water table? What do we depend on? In Kitsap County, we're almost completely on aquifer. We have four reservoirs, and I took a look at their information on them. They seem to be okay, but that's not going to handle the almost 300,000 people we have on the peninsula in the crisis. And you talk to the water professionals, and they all know what their own little pod that they managing is doing, but they don't know how it connects to everything else. So we really don't know what the water tables are doing here, and it's a lot of concern to a lot of people. So why should we care about that? Well, what happens if you turn your tap on and the water smells really bad? And it smells toxic and chemical. There are places in West Virginia and Tennessee where people can light their water on fire as it comes out of the tap because of fracking chemicals that have gotten into the groundwater. No, we don't do fracking here, but that's an example of things that can get into the water and create things. I know a couple of the water professionals I've talked to are worried about non-organic farmers and nitrates getting into the water, the surface water here, and killing the fish supplies and the salmon. I know the tribes are very worried about that as well. There are all kinds of issues around water and water tables.
I've got a friend in Hawaii who is suffering from the water crisis down there and not able to
From the
take
jet fuel?
Yeah, she's not able to take showers in her home. They can't drink the water. It's doing things to their skin down there, and there's just not a lot of answers.
If you want a Hollywood version of this, watch Aaron Brockovich. It's a brilliant show about this exact thing.
Flint, Michigan.
Also, huh?
I said Flint, Michigan, and their water issues.
Exactly. And so water's about fresh water that we drink is about 3% of all the water on the planet. 3%. Then you think about that and you think about and someone's going to immediately say, well, we'll just do desalination. Let's talk about that for a minute. The largest desalination plant in the country is in San Diego, California. It's about $1 billion in. It does not produce as much water as it needs to produce. And it's twice as much as even an expensive water district.
Let me ask you,
sure.
Mark, we are surrounded by, salt water. And saying they use the desalination process in order to use that water. Is that correct?
They do. And they have desalination plants on carriers. That's how they get drinking water on aircraft carriers.
So why is that process not more efficient now with all the technology that we have? I mean, we've got this abundance of water.
I sure would like to know the answer to that. But several years ago during the drought, California was in such crisis that they were within 10 feet of the Hoover Dam not being able to function and generate power throughout Southern California because the water was only 10 feet above the pipes.
Wow.
And that could have changed in a week, and there would have been power outages all through Southern California and drinking water issues. We've basically drained the Colorado River. It doesn't make it to the Mexican border anymore because it's feeding, for lack of a better description, golf courses and agriculture all along the way down there. But we've drained the river for the last 100 miles to the Mexican border. I'm using water as an example here, but dominoes are everywhere. Pollution, food crisis. They say that we have about 60 years of arable soil left before we can't grow food anymore because we've eroded it and we've poisoned it and we don't care for it. We have monoculture, means that we may have 10,000 kinds of wheat, we grow one, maybe two. We have 6,000 types of corn, we grow one, maybe two. And we grow a lot of it, but we only grow one or two. The healthy state of the environment is a diverse state. And we do everything we can to bring it down with it. So why is this necessary? Why is building resilience necessary? So I just talked about water, I just talked about food, and the fact that and the question is, can we really trust the agencies in charge of delivering these to us? And I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm just saying that they think of things in one way. Here's another side of that cascading dominoes. I did a tour of the Brownsville wastewater treatment plant about 4 years ago, maybe 5. And the people that were working there have been there for 30 years, and they aren't retiring because there's no one to replace them. We've sent all of our children to college to get white collar degrees and MBAs, and we aren't sending people to become to do blue collar jobs anymore. So we have a crisis in this country about blue collar jobs that we're going to see more and more of, where blue collar jobs are being empty and we don't get the services. Right now, it takes 3 weeks to get a plumber to your house. Now, how does that work when your basement's flooded, or you've got feces coming up through your bathtub? I mean, if you can't get people, yeah, it's happened. You can't get people to your house to fix it. We're in crisis. So one of the things that on the report is we talk about education for all, and looking hard at our education system and rethinking our priorities based on that. Why is this necessary? Because we have climate crisis, whether you believe it or not. We have weather changing. We have tornadoes in places they've never been before. We have weather patterns that are getting worse and worse. I mean, the Northeast never got hurricanes. Now they're getting hurricanes every other year. I'm not even mentioning Cascadia Rising in the entire west coast of the United States when that comes about. So why is it necessary? Because the only people you can really trust when a disaster happens is your neighbors. The only people you can work with are the people around you, because no one else is going to get there. First responders, they're not going to get anywhere if something like Cascadia happens. If flooding happens, you're going to get some response, but it's really going to be you and your neighbors that have to work together.
I'm
So
thinking
that's
while
why.
I'm thinking while you're talking, it's like, I've been in Washington State for, since, well, since the third grade. I don't remember there being tornadoes in Washington State, and we've had two in Kitsap County in what, 3 years.
Yeah.
I mean, is there any historical, data of
Not,
us having tornadoes on a regular basis? Like what?
and also, we're in the circle of fire. I mean, everybody's talking about Mount Rainier and how Mount Rainier could blow, and then Kent, Renton, all of those areas, Auburn, all of those areas are gone.
Wait, what's the circle of fire?
Oh, well, we have volcanoes. We have, the Mount St. Helens, of course. We have Mount Rainier, of course. These are active volcanoes, and there's several of them that go all the way around the Puget Sound area and underwater out to sea. So any one of those things can happen. It's a flip of a coin, and to believe they're not going to happen is just arrogance. Believing because we live here, it's not going to happen. Cascadia Rising, the last time Cascadia Rising happened was January 26th, 1700 at 9 o'clock. We know this because there were no people here except for the Native Americans, and they know about it. They have verbal history about it. But there were several villages wiped out in Japan by tsunamis with no earthquake. So they documented those, and they were able to track that back and figure out that that's when Cascadia had happened, which is two plates, where am I on the camera? Two plates releasing about 90 miles offshore, the North American plate and the San Juan de Fuca plate. And it'll go about 900 kilometers from South Vancouver Island to Crescent City, California. It has happened 40 plus times in 10,000 years. The average is between 250 to 450, 500 years. We're at 321, 22 now in 6 days, 7 days.
Will we get any water warning signs?
From Cascadia Rising?
Yeah.
We'll probably get a tsunami warning, and that's it. And the quake will hit, and a 9 magnitude quake is a quake that lasts about 6 minutes, somewhere between 5 and 6 minutes, and it will continue to roll for 24 hours. I posted on our Facebook page the tsunami warning the other day from Tonga.
Yeah, that made me think of you first and foremost. When and Tonga is super far away, and we've got this tsunami warning, and it's like, I was really concerned because when the news came out, I was watching a news clip, and it was saying, "Yeah, well, the warning is in effect for now. It could be hitting now." It's like, wow, you're just reporting it, and it's already here. Like, Thanks. That's helpful.
Yeah, and then immediately somebody posted that it's only going to be 1 to 2 foot waves and da 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 da. And I'm like going, and yeah, but it's going to, and it's low tide right now. I said, yeah, but it can go on for 24 hours. And it's not the 1 or 2 foot surges; it's the fact that they're coming in at 75, 80 miles an hour.
Wow.
So there's a lot of, and people throw things out there to emphasize the factor. When I post something like that, I'm not telling you to, man up, get your supplies and go to your bunker. I'm basically saying, be aware that you need to not go near the waterfront today.
And these things are happening more frequently, right? I mean, we
All the
talked about
time.
the tornadoes. We're talking about this underwater volcano that erupts and how something on the other side of the world can still affect us here within what hours, right? Because
Yeah,
it's
within hours.
we've got our our snow events. We've had what the hottest recorded um, temperatures.
10
What
years in a row.
10 years in a row, right? I mean, it's
10
like
years in a row.
how do we explain that otherwise? The huge iceberg the size of what Puerto Rico that may fall into the ocean or fall into
Yep.
the sea. There's a
And
lot
when you
going
think about that, we think, okay, so that's weather, we'll deal with that. But other than the fact that our soil's eroding and all the rest of the things, it's going to affect our food production. ASDA, the wholly owned subsidiary of Walmart in the United Kingdom, did a sustainability report in 2015. And they determined that 95% of their fresh produce was at risk due to climate change in the next decade. 95%.
wow.
Costco put out $50 million a couple of years ago to shore up their organic produce supply. And by the way, I don't know if you know this, but Costco is the number one seller of organic produce in the United States right now.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So when you think about these things, why is it necessary to build resilient communities? Because you can't do it alone. Yet our cultural framework tells us that we need to be individuals and we need to do it alone and we need to stand strong and we need to be afraid of our neighbors and we need to be afraid of everybody else. But the fact is, we can't stand alone. We need each other. And it's high time we start embracing our humanity and learning how to get along together.
You
So,
said high tide. I see what you did there. So we
and so,
can,
why is it necessary? Let me return the question. Do you think it's necessary?
I do think it's necessary, and like I said, I really enjoy our conversations and learning about these things from you because I've never paid attention to that. Right, my head is down. I'm focused on the the minutia of the tasks and duties that I have to do as just living. Uh, Getting dressed for the day and dealing with bills and just all those things and not worried about the more macro things that have such an impact not only on my life and quality of life but even more so for my children and my grandchildren, right? And what world are they going to inherit, and are we going to damage it beyond repair? uh, so you think of living leaving a will for your kids so they have they're financially secure, they have some advantages there, but all the money in the world is going to do them nothing if they're living in a dead planet where they're just suffering. And so I think about that a lot more now, and just a lot more cognizant of that. And what do I need to do? How do I educate myself? How do I educate people around me and get this information out and say, hey, this is a priority that we need to be concerned about. So that's absolutely necessary. We need to look up, kind of the movie on Netflix, right? Uh,
Right.
so very appropriate in this conversation.
So let's change the question a little bit.
Sure.
Why would we want to? What do we get out of it?
Well, it's just what I said. Even if I'm thinking about from a I don't know if it's a biological imperative of wanting your offspring to survive on, right? I want them to survive on,
But
and
but
to
but
do.
there's a better answer. There's a better answer for here and now.
Go
You know,
ahead.
human beings are wired for community. We're wired to be connected to each other. We're hardwired. It's used against us all the time, but we are hardwired to be in community. It's hard because we're told not to trust each other, and the guy on the corner is a curmudgeon, and he's angry all the time, and he's always like yelling at his trash cans, whatever. I don't really want to talk to him, but I bet you there's people you never talk to in your neighborhood that you can go talk to and say, hey, I really want to get to know everybody. I'm going to break bread. I'm going to have a potluck and bring everybody out. Let's talk to it. If you make a couple friends out of that and build some other relationships, that's a good thing. If you find that you have a nurse in your neighborhood or a doctor and bad things happen and you guys get together and build and put in medical supplies, you're better off, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
If we get together and drive an effort to learn what our water tables are like and manage our waters on a macro scale instead of like depending on all these micro managing groups and special utilities and special tax districts to do it, wouldn't it be better to know what our water tables are doing all across the county and manage our water? Because let's see, we talked to water is kind of an important thing, right? What if we got together and developed more community gardens in our areas, and you go help your neighbor who's got a bit of a yard to grow food, so you now have food where you are. You might join the Kids Up Resiliency Project, hint hint, and help us drive the Food for All project, which would put local grow centers and create 1,000 jobs. That might be a reason to do this and to focus some of your time and energy on it, to create local food so that our food that is going to the supermarkets here isn't traveling 900 to 1,500 kilometers to get here.
And
So why would you want to do that?
I'll give you my own example of what you're talking about. I share my Wi-Fi with my neighbor. Um, I have a neighbor that can come by and get things for me if they need it, toilet paper, paper towels, things of that nature. So we're in community in that way. And then I have another neighbor who's at the end of the block that was doing food prep for me. And so, having some dietary restrictions, and like I said, I need to try to prioritize it, right? We're busy. There's so many things that you need to do and learn about. This person already has that expertise and was willing to help me out in that way. And it's like, I'm already doing this stuff and I can prepare this for you. And so that's how the community is giving back just in that small ecosystem. So
Exactly.
it's in action already, but I can expand it even more. I've got a gentleman 2 doors down that has the same F-250 that I do, right? And he's working on it all the time. Well, I'm not a mechanic, but I can ask him all kinds of questions. And so it's really, it's not even thinking out of the box. It's like, you know what? You need to there's a lot of good stuff in the box. You just look
Yeah,
around the box, stop trying to get fancy and look outside of it and look at all the great things in the box. The box is your
but
neighborhood.
I would argue that it's looking outside the box to what we have now. It's not looking outside of our human box, but it's looking outside of our cultural box.
Hmm, I like it. I like it.
So yeah, it's a matter of understanding that, and I didn't really want to get into this at this point because it's a pretty hefty conversation. It actually might be a two-parter. We may carry this into next week. Um, but when I say culture, I know a lot of people are thinking the opera, and what I'm talking about is a cultural framework. We have a social contract that is our culture, and that social contract is so that we can live together and work together and be in harmony. And in the best possible worlds, the the social contract would support our humanity. And I will ask this of you: does our culture support our humanity? Or is our humanity an afterthought to our culture? Do we count in this culture? Marwan, I'm asking that of you. So,
Well, I'm thinking, oh, you can't see me right now. Uh,
yeah,
I think it depends on, what culture you're referring to, right? There's lots of different cultures. You were saying
actually, there
something
isn't.
well, you were saying something earlier where you were talking about uh in regards to community and how, the powers that be really de-incentivize and try to keep us apart, right? Um and for me, I guess the question back to you as I'm asking this is, why would they want us to do that and not have community? We can do so much if we are actually together. So it seems counterintuitive, even from their own agenda, to have us separated.
Because if we were together, we might not accept what we are given.
Mm,
Think of our culture as a organic artificial intelligence. We
okay.
program it to do things we need. If we were programming it as human beings, it would look a lot different than it does today. We would have universal health care in this country. We would have people managing the water because we would understand that it was important. We would not have a commodities market where people could gamble and manipulate prices of food and water and other important things because they need to make wealth. Wealth would not be the target of the or the goal of the culture. Our supporting our humanity and working together and innovating together and doing things better that are better for our humanity. We wouldn't be driving around in vehicles that are essentially 100-year-old technology with new paint jobs and new fenders, different shaped fenders. We would have a whole new level of innovation happening. So if this cultural contract, this AI, was not programmed by us, who was it programmed by?
So I don't know.
The people who are successful and get the most out of it. And I'm not doing some conspiracy saying there's Illuminati out there doing all of these weird things or aliens, whatever. I'm simply talking about the people who run the playbook where wealth generate where they generate wealth, and generating wealth is the goal of the argument. These are not necessarily smart people. They're not necessarily, and I hate using the word greedy. These are people who are broken and feel scarcity and never feel enough. Their bonds are broken. They need more and more and more to feel more secure within themselves. And they're the ones programming our culture because they're the ones with the most influence on it. While we live our lives of quiet desperation, while they garner more wealth. We already know that the top 10% hold 90% of the wealth in this country, or get 90% of all new wealth in this country and hold over 50% of the total wealth in this country.
And I guess that's where my disconnect is, Mark, is it is so hard for me to put myself in the mindset of them, 'cause the questions of, when is enough enough, right? Um,
They
you
never
know,
ask that question. It never occurs.
I know that's why it's so hard for me to put myself into their mindset of
Yep.
saying, hey, I've got to keep accumulating. I need more, 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 and I need all these folks to not only be below me, but to be so far below me and to suffer
They
that's
don't
the
think about that either. They
I
think
mean,
about they can't see beyond themselves. They cannot see beyond their own driving need,
it's so hard
and
to recognize.
that blows our mind. But there are a few of them, and there are a great many more of us. But we have to realize what's going on, and we have to come together, and we have to decide how to reprogram the computer, so that our cultural construct, our social contract, so it is more reflective of our humanity, our shared humanity.
So let me ask you this: there are so many more of us. Why do we allow these systems to, persist?
Because we don't think about the fact that those systems exist at all.
I wonder also, is it the carrot is you too can, continue to strive. So you're on this hamster wheel and they're telling you, hey, try to get up here with us. It's great up
Yeah.
here.
Go
And
get your MBA, go get your master's, go get your PhD, or go to work for a corporation, and you too can be rich. Except that's not how it works. It's the promise, but it's not the reality.
so how do we dismantle this?
We don't dismantle it, we reprogram it. And that's what the Kids Have Resiliency Project's about. And we're not trying to change the entire world in one fell swoop. What we're trying to do is change people's minds on the ground level for basic things like let's get together and map our neighborhood because we really can't depend on other people to take care of us in a big disaster. Let's figure out who our neighbors are. Then let's get people who are part of the neighborhood to be represented in a larger community effort where the network neighborhoods become a larger group, and then throughout the region until we get it to where people are. Once we have a grassroots movement, we can start changing things like how we address wastewater, how we address water, how we address food, and we can start creating real food security in the area. We can start looking at things like, okay, so we aren't going to get universal health care out of the government, the federal government anytime soon, probably not out of the Washington state government, though I know that there are conversations going on. So let's look at here in Kitsap County what we can do to provide a different level of health care.
Mm.
Let's talk about education in this county and talk about skill-based education and things like learning how to have relationships with people and not talk about teaching to the test. Let's take a long look at the hamster wheel that we have, sending people to college to get white collar degrees when we're in a crisis for blue collar people to work. Now you can go to the promise of, and you said it earlier, the promise of going to college and getting a corporate job is you can make millions of dollars with on the stock market and everything else, which is, by the way, just legalized gambling. Or you can get into an apprenticeship program and make $30 coming out of the apprenticeship program doing blue collar work. And I know an awful lot of people with master's degrees who are making $15 an hour at fast food restaurants.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there just aren't the jobs out there.
Right.
Hey, I don't want to put too hard an edge on it, but we're in a shell game, and the P keeps moving on us. And it's time we pay attention to the fact that that's the truth. Come together and don't get violent, don't revolve. Come together and make different decisions based on our own best interests together.
So let me ask you this, and I agree with everything you're saying. And the last word you said is to come together for our own best interest. And what we've been doing to this point is falling for the fallacy of voting against our own self-interest, right?
Yep.
Going after things that are designed to harm us and to keep us where we're at, right? To keep us divided. So how do we begin to address that? How we, right now, they're saying, hey, being woke is a bad thing. So they've put this negative connotation to it. And,
I
and what
love
it
words.
is, yeah, it just, you turn something that's positive, as you're saying, right? They want you to stay in this space. But being woke in and of itself isn't a bad thing. It's an awakening of what I was saying to you, right? I love having our conversations and learning about the environment and wastewater and Cascadia Rising and things like that. That's being woke, right? That's looking,
It's being
out.
aware and being human.
It's looking outside of myself. So in some ways, right? You were talking about the rich can only see, their own self-interest. They can't see beyond themselves. And in some ways, I can't see beyond myself either. And so waking up, this awakening of seeing, hey, the environment and all these things are have a big impact on the quality of life and sustainability and resiliency of the earth, going forward,
Absolutely.
and
So
resources that are finite.
we're going to get to the puzzle pieces in just a minute, but you know me well enough now to know that I'm just a bit contrary and and
No.
and, and hard to pin down. in some ways. But when people say, well, you're just being woke, I said, yeah, what's wrong with that? Do you please tell me why being woke and aware of people other than yourself and the situations that are out there is a bad thing? I consider that a survival skill. And I'm a little disturbed that you don't. So as I said, I'm a little bit contrary. So when people challenge me on stuff like that, I go, yeah, and
Yeah, it's interesting when the you can demonize learning
yeah,
and
I mean, we're afraid of it. For anybody who has never seen it, go on YouTube and look up the newsroom opening speech. There's a segment. It started a series by Aaron Sorkin who did West Wing, and if you've never seen it, it's one of the most brilliant 5 minutes of television you will ever see in your life. A guy who has always been doesn't want to disturb anybody. He wants to keep his ratings up as a newscaster. He doesn't say anything. He gets asked a question and pushed for an answer, and he goes into a 5 minute diatribe about why America is not the greatest country in the world. It's freaking brilliant.
now where is that? I would like to type that in the chat.
Newsroom. It's you can get it. You can find it on YouTube. It's the opening dialogue and the news the HBO series, The Newsroom. If you have HBO Max, you can see it on there and watch the series. I highly recommend it. It's worth watching.
It's the opening kind of
Yeah,
scene.
it's the opening to the entire program.
All right,
Introduces the main character pretty spectacularly.
you could probably YouTube that, I imagine.
Okay, so we talked about the dominoes and the domino effect. We've talked about trust issues with our government. I mean, we talk about, and I'm going to go very briefly into the COVID thing. We don't trust people don't trust the COVID vaccine situation. We know this because we've heard a lot about it. But if you can set aside in your head the difference between pharmaceutical companies owning our medical practices, which they do, and the for-profit mentality of the pharmaceutical industry, which is not trustworthy. But this is different. This is an other thing, but we don't have the critical thinking because we are not taught critical thinking. We are not challenged to think critically in our schools. Another thing I want to deal with in our education system, to say, well, this is different than that. I don't trust pharmaceutical companies, and I don't trust how they're influenced medical practice because they do things that are not science. They push things that are not known science. I am not against vaccinations. I am against vaccinations where science says this person should not have this vaccination until they're 4 years old, and they're trying to give it to infants. That's something I have an issue with. That's a situation where it creates trust for me, a trust issue for me. That's one of the areas where for-profit starts raising questions and red flags for me instead of working with a doctor. And I remember the last time I had a doctor that I could actually work with that wasn't driven by pharmaceutical companies was almost 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. So for me, all of this is part of the same thing. We're making choices and not being given the tools. So let's talk about the other game
scenario. Well, hold on. Before you do that, let me ask you a question, because I think a lot of us feel the way that you do, but unfortunately, what ends up happening is we throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
So exactly, because we do not have tools to critically think.
Right. So there's the distrust in the pharmaceutical companies, but at the same time, right, the medicines that they produce, diabetic medications, things of that nature, the vaccine, are sound in the certain conditions, right? So how do you parse out, okay, yeah, these guys are some capitalist dirtbags and they just want to fill their pockets, but at the same time, this is actual a viable medication that we should embrace.
By reining in the pharmaceutical salespeople that go into doctors' offices to sell them on the newest product and give them free samples and tell them how to do things, because a pharmaceutical salesman is not a medical professional, and they should not be informing the doctor of how to practice medicine. It should be quite the other way. You should give them an option and a tool, not tell them how to do things. When I go into the doctor's office now, and they say, well, your blood pressure is high, here, take this drug. I say, well, how is it high? And so what should I do to change my diet? Well, let me send you to a nutritionist. And I go to the nutritionist and they're telling me things that I knew from 20 years ago. There's no new information. I was diagnosed as pre-diabetic. I changed my diet. 6 months later, I was not diabetic at all. The doctor said, how did you do that? I said, I changed my diet. Why is that not the first thing and the pharmaceutical the second?
Right. So here's my question, right? So you're saying, okay, we need to dismantle, this
Not dismantle, but reprogram.
reprogram. Yes, let me
Right.
get the language correct there. In the interim, until we, get the salespeople to stop lobbying, doctors and hospitals, right? We have a pandemic out. And so what ends up happening is people will say, well, until that's, resolved, I'm not going to take this, or I'm not going to, and that's also not the answer. So, until
How do you get the word out? You do it the same way we're building the Kids Up Resiliency Project, word of mouth, talking to people. I mean, I don't tell people to get vaccinated or not get vaccinated. I point out the reasoning for it and leave it alone. It's really up to them. I mean, I'd be kind of a horrible hypocrite if I said that you shouldn't, tell other people what to do and then I do it. How to solve this problem? Well, you can't solve the trust issue with the pharmaceutical companies in the time frame that we have. You just can't. So what you have to do is you have to get the word out and get people to do some of their own research. You've asked me before where I go for research. I go to the World Health Organization because their information is clean, easy to read, and unfortunately less political than our CDC. So I just like to go to the source. They also have the best epidemiologists in the world, because every epidemiologist that graduates with their degree goes to Switzerland. Where's the World Health Organization? Oh, Switzerland.
So let me ask you this: would it be helpful? Because I believe in taking action immediately. Going and having a conversation with your primary care doctor and asking, are they being lobbied, by some of these pharmaceutical companies for some of these medications, and are these things that you are prescribing to me, and starting to inform them on that and starting to push back and saying, I'm going to change you as my primary, or ask those questions when they're suggesting a new medicine. Like,
Yep.
why are you suggesting this to me? Is it based on, you've been lobbied to do that, or what the case may be? Is that one thing that we can do to empower and start to change the direction here and reprogram?
Absolutely. I also strongly recommend that people do their own research. Now, I watch Bo the Fifth Column because of all of the people that I've watched on YouTube. He breaks stuff down. He doesn't influence you to say things one way or the other. He just breaks the whole situation down for you and gives you information. And 99% of the time, he puts source material in there, which means you can go read the scientific paper. You can go read the information that he's reading, the primary information he's reading, so that you can make those decisions. Now, on one of his shows the other day, he said, when people say they've done their own research, they usually mean they've listened to somebody like me on YouTube and made their decision based on that without actually having done any of the research. I highly recommend you do your own research. Look at the scientific paper. When people start saying something to me that sounds a little bit conspiracy theory-ish, I say, can you give me the source material for that? I want to actually read the scientific data behind it. And that
But
usually closes the conversation pretty quick.
the challenge, Mark, is, we're such busy people, and it's like, okay, so now you want me to research climate, you want me to research the pharmaceutical company, you wanted me to research food, and you want me to research water, and it's like, I don't have time to do all this research and
No,
read all this stuff.
you don't. But for something that's important to you, like your health, and what you're taking, I'd spend a few minutes to go on find out what the drug is that I'm taking. I'd
Yeah,
like to see what the side effects are. I'd like to see where what its best practice use of it is. I would like to see some of the success statistics. All of that's readily available online. You don't have to know everything, but if you want to know something and you want to come out and speak about it, it'd be pretty good if you just like spend some time learning about it.
right. But I am trusting the medical professional, my primary care doctor, or a friend who's also taking the medicine that I trust to say, hey, this is good. And that's, you know, I'm assuming
So
they've done the research because I trust them. And so therefore I'm going to take it.
when I, and this is my trust issue, when I was diagnosed with prediabetes, I was given a diabetes drug. I took it just the way it was supposed to be, and my wife damn near called the ambulance because I was on the floor and couldn't get up.
Mm.
It tanked my blood sugar so badly that I literally was on the floor and couldn't move.
You needed one of those medical alerts. I've fallen and I can't get up.
Something like that, yeah. So when we have a few minutes left, I want to talk about the other thing, the jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, jump in there.
A lot of what KidSap Resiliency Project is about, and especially resilient ecosystems, a part in this, is when you build a jigsaw puzzle, you build the edges first. That's how you figure out what's going on inside the puzzle. So the solution to the dominoes issue is building the framework of the puzzle and figuring and prioritizing issues. But we're only building the edge of the puzzle. And the reason that we're only building the edge of the puzzle is because we don't know what the picture is going to be until you bring your pieces of the puzzle to the table. And you may not think that you have a puzzle piece that is meaningful, but you do. You'll ask a question, you'll look at something differently, you'll say, I really would like this to be this. And that's something that none of us have thought of. And that's how we develop the picture of the puzzle about what our human future is going to look like. So really, when we say join the KidSap Resiliency Project, bring your pieces of the puzzle so that we can start looking at what the future is going to look like. I have a list of things that we're working on, but that list could be 100 times bigger than it is if you bring your piece of the puzzle.
And I might add how we go about completing that is going to
Right.
change based on the people's pieces.
And we might have some medical professionals who really know their stuff and don't like the pharmaceutical solutions to come and give their pieces of the puzzle, and we'll get a whole new look at information. I know a lot of educators out there that don't particularly like the way the school system is teaching kids.
Yeah, if I could snap my fingers and had all the resources in the world, I'd love to start. I don't necessarily want to call it a charter school. That's such a polarizing word in itself, but
Yep.
some kind of a schooling and education alternative where you're being taught about health and financial literacy and community and
There are other alternatives to the standard education practice. When you get out of high school, you can go to the IBEW and become an apprentice electrician.
Mm-hmm.
You can go and apprentice at a wastewater treatment plant and learn how to do that work. You can apprentice to a plumber. There are a lot of unions out there that have great apprenticeship programs.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are other options we have that we just aren't doing.
Searching for something while you're talking.
Okay.
I can find it before we jump off here. I like what you just said there. But
Yeah, I know that.
so how do they bring their puzzle piece?
What was that?
How do they bring their puzzle piece? Where do they bring it to?
They come to the meet and greets, and we can talk and we can find out what their passion is in the project around what they like. A lot of people we talk to are all about food, and food security. Water security is a little harder for people, but I'm sure that there are people out there. Bring your piece, and let's talk about water security. Let's talk about how to do water filtration in your home so that we can stop the miles and miles and miles of pipes in the ground. One of the things I talked about in the report is that they test for water quality at the source, not at the end. They don't come to your apartment and check your pipes and find out. And we have miles and miles and miles of pipes in the ground that have been there for 20, 30, 40 years. Do you think that what's coming out your pipe might be affected by that
Yeah.
or out of your tap? We talk about infrastructure, but we haven't really significantly upgraded our infrastructure since the 60s. That's the 1960s. And it's more past time. We've got the technology, they just don't want to invest in it because it affects shareholder profit.
Yeah, I can't find what I'm looking for, but I'll pull it up next week.
Okay.
I think that
So
would
what are
be.
we going to talk about next week? Are we going to continue talking about the puzzle pieces or?
Yeah, I think we should continue to talk about the puzzle pieces, and then also I think our question for next week is going to be. Let me just pull this up and type this in the chat. Is what is wrong with the cultural framework that we currently have?
We touched a little bit on that this time, but we can talk about it more. And we'll talk a little bit about why I think it looks like an organic AI. I mean, it's about who puts it, with a computer. What you put in is what you get out. And if only a few people who benefit by it are doing the programming, then all of the rest of us are not getting the benefit.
Well, if we continue in that vein, right now we have, there's a few people that are programming the framework, and so how do we become programmers? I think is the solution, right? Is how do we become the programmers and then change the programming?
By coming together and deciding how to do it differently. We the people is the first line in the Constitution of the United States.
What I think is awesome too is just to finish that thought is food for all, water for all, innovation. There's so many different things. So as you're bringing your piece, you don't have to worry about trying to tackle all of those things. You've got an
Just one
interest.
piece.
Yeah, you've got knowledge, skills, and abilities that you can bring to bear. And it's like, you know what? I've got ideas and I can bring this to water or I can bring this to food. You don't have to try to solve all of the problems. So I think it's
One step at a time.
way to address, these issues that exist.
Yeah, I love this song by Walk the Moon called "One Foot in Front of the Other,"
Mm.
because that's what we have to do. Just put one foot in front of the other. As long as we keep moving forward and we move forward together, first the journey's a whole lot more fun because now we're on a road trip, and the music's going to be diverse, and we're going to solve the problems as we go.
I love it. I love it. I tell you, Mark, our hours go so tremendously quick. This is probably the fastest show in regards to just information that's coming at you. And yeah, I love our Wednesdays. I love our conversations. I want to give you the last word. Mark will be posting next week's question on Facebook. What is wrong with the cultural framework that we have? So please go ahead and answer your questions there. Put your input in there. If you have other questions, put those things in there. If you want to join, please engage in that way. Mark, how do you want to leave us today?
I want everybody to think about what it would look like to have a block party with your neighbors.
All right. I will answer that next week for sure. And
All
I
right.
may actually go around to my neighbors and ask them and get their input.
Yep.
You
So
know,
let's look at what it would look like to have a block party, and maybe I don't know. Right now, we don't have the resources to do it, but we're looking at maybe getting the resources where we can host and sponsor a few block parties.
oh, I love it. I love it. All right. Well, everyone, for Mark, Resilience Econosystems, please go to www.roseco.org. I am Marwan Cameron. This is The Conduit. We will see you next Wednesday. All right,
Have a great
everyone.
time, all.